Dr. Manal Al-Muallim. Dr. Ali Hassan is diagnostic radiology resident at Suleymaniya Medical Complex in Bahrain. He completed Doctor of Medicine with honor from University of Jordan. Dr. Ali has more than 20 publications in several well-known scientific journals around the world and has attended and participated in many scientific conferences related to this field. Dr. Manal Al-Muallim, she is pediatric physician from Suleymaniya Medical Complex in Bahrain. She is active in research with keen interest in pediatric and neurological condition. She is organizer of the Research Society for Residents. Well, you want to know if journal will accept or reject your paper. That's depend on how you write your paper. So let's deep dive with Dr. Ali Hassan and Dr. Manal Al-Muallim to know how to write a paper in a scientific and academic way. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ali and Dr. Manal. Welcome, Dr. Ali and Dr. Manal, you can start now.
Thank you, Dr. Rania, for this introduction. Good evening, everyone. This is Manal Al-Muallim from Suleymaniya Medical Complex. I'm delighted to present for the deep dive into clinical research course. We are going to have two talks. The first talk is about how to write a research paper, and the other one is about the use of citation manager software. The material of both talks were prepared by me and Dr. Ali Yusuf, and we will be presenting them together. We choose to have these talks in sequence to maintain the flow of our presentations. We will start now with this topic, how to write a research paper. And then we'll do this.
Dr. Manal, sorry for interruption, but your voice is not clear. Can you find a way just to make it more clear?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Look like it's far away.
Okay, just so.
How about now?
Is it okay now?
I can, maybe it's better, but still there is like an echo or...
Is it better now?
It's a little bit better, but you can proceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start the presentation now. If you have any question, you can keep it in the Q&A box, or you can contact us by our emails, which will be at the end of our presentation. So, before we take a deep dive into our topic, let's spend a few minutes talking about the overall structure of any research paper. Although this talk is intended for people who are writing papers, it is also useful for understanding how papers are written. And though it is primarily aimed at research papers, it is also applies to thesis and to those who are doing postgraduate degrees. So why are papers written like that? Research papers are written in a standard format, whether they are scientific papers, conference abstracts, or thesis. This standard format is extremely useful because it allows the reader to know in advance where to find what they are looking for. Most of people rarely read a research paper from beginning to end like a novel because not everything in the paper is relevant to every reader. The science literature is constantly expanding at a rate that makes it virtually impossible to read every word, even in a fairly narrow subject area. So, it is very important for a reader to be able to locate the material they want to read in a research paper. In some ways, paper is like a supermarket. If you know the layout, then you can move efficiently, getting the items you need in sequence rather than bumbling about and wasting your time. So, do you need to know how the authors sampled the people they studied? Or do you need to see where they source the questionnaires they use? Or how they think their results add to our understanding? Each of these questions will send you to a different place in the paper. Know where to look, and you will have the answers in a second. The most important thing about writing a paper is that it should be purposeful. A reader of a novel is just looking for something interesting to read, but a reader of a research paper will have a list of questions in mind before they start. They will read the paper to find the answers. So, a clear structure will make sure that the reader can find the information they need because A, it is there, and B, it is in the right place. So, what the reader wants to know? There are some questions that the reader might ask, and indeed, these are the questions that you should probably be asking as you read a paper. Here I will show some questions. One question is that, is the research question relevant to me? Or more specifically, what question does this paper try to answer? Another question is, what data did the author collect to answer the question? What was the study design? How was the sample defined and gathered? What measures were used to collect the data? And what precautions against biases were built into the design? What result did they find? Or more specifically, who did they study and what did they find? Are there biases in the research that could have an important impact on the conclusion? Could the studied setting, sample, measures have influenced the conclusion? What is the significance of the result for our knowledge and understanding? What implications has it for the practice? What research should we be doing next? So, when you write a paper, keep all these questions in your mind. Now, how a paper is structured. The structure of a paper follows the structure of the research process itself. If you visualize the research process, then you will see how it also describes the flow throughout the different sections of a research paper. The research process. It is almost always start by focusing on a relevant question, then moving through the process of gathering the data, and then use the data to try to answer this question. So, the research process always starts with defining the current state of our knowledge and understanding. Then, we select the question that needs to be answered. Then, we develop the methods that we are going to use to gather the data. Then we go and gather the data, we analyze the data, and then we interpret
we interpret our findings, and then we integrate the findings into the current knowledge and understanding. So it's a circular process, and in many ways, human knowledge is like a puzzle. Each piece of the research adds a piece to the puzzle. Some pieces simply add more details, but other pieces make us pause and reinterrupt the picture. Here are the different sections of the research paper. Each element of the paper has a function. First is the title. The title describes the research uniquely, and we will talk about it in details in a few minutes. Then the abstract. The abstract is like a map of the paper, and it contains the most important information that we need to understand. Then the introduction. It justifies the research and introduces the research question. In the methods, we show how the research question was translated into a practical data gathering exercise. In the results, we present the findings without any other comments. In the discussion, we show what the research adds to our knowledge and understanding. And it also reviews its strengths and limitations and discusses the implications for practice and for further research. Then the reference, where we list all works referred to into the paper, and then the appendix or the supplementary materials, because some materials such as questionnaires, technical details, or maybe of limited interest for some people. So these are often published online as a supplementary materials. And in thesis or report, they may be included after the main body of the text as an appendix. So let's talk about every section in more details, starting with the title. Your title is your first selling point. Make sure that it tells the reader the most important thing about your work. The title should include 1. The research question, the methods used, and the population studied. In practice, you will find that titles succeed to a greater or lesser extent in fulfilling these objectives. However, if you know what should be in a title, then you can write a better one. Some titles also try to tell you the results. Interestingly, papers that do so tend to be less often cited in the literature than the papers that describe the question. Here I will go through some examples of the titles for research paper and comment on them. Take a few seconds to read this title. It says, the frequency and nature of adverse events in Saudi hospitals, a retrospective record review study. Here, the title is absolutely clear. Here, another example. Take a few seconds to read it. It says, exploring the antipathy of nursing staff in sourced healthcare facilities across the United Kingdom to young people who self-harm. The research question and population are clear here, though the methods are not. Is it qualitative or is it a survey? We don't know. Another example. Cross-national differences in older adult loneliness. The question here is clear. Though the methods and population are not, still the international comparison are the selling point here. Another example. If you read this example, this paper skips straight to the findings, leaving us figuring out the question, which might be easy, and the methods, which is close to impossible to figure it out. So, as you can see, your title is very important, so write it carefully. When you are submitting a paper to a journal, it is the first thing that the editor will read. So, a well-written title is going to favor your chance of publication. Next is the abstract. The abstract is like a map of the paper. Think for a moment about what makes a map useful. The first thing, and it is so obvious that most of us maybe didn't think about it, a map is much smaller than the thing it shows. So, how do you make a small map of a big thing? By leaving things out. A map will show the essential structure, leaving out the needless details. An abstract works the same way. You should write your abstract very carefully so that it would convey all the essential elements of the research as briefly and accurately as possible. It is worth spending quite some time making sure that the abstract is clear and accurate. And remember, anyone interested in the research will start by reading the abstract. Indeed, the abstract is often the only thing that you need to read to understand a piece of research, and the actual paper will just fill in the other details. To ensure that the text of your abstract is closely based on text form from your paper, never write an abstract off the top of your head. You are likely to mispresent your study, or at the very least to introduce discrepancies between the paper and the abstract. Next part is the introduction. The introduction to a scientific paper is an important part also of the paper. This is because the introduction is where the author shows why their research is needed to fill a gap into our knowledge or understanding. And the purpose of the introduction is to describe the context of the research by summarizing the knowledge we have up to date. And then we draw the attention to something that we don't know or we don't understand or haven't yet studied. And then to tell how the author are planning to fill this gap in the knowledge. So the introduction is usually follow a three-part structure. First, an introduction to what is known already. 2, what is not known. Here, the abstract should focus smoothly and rapidly on the unknown, paving the way for the most important sentence in the whole paper, which is number 3, with the statement of the research question. In the biomedical literature, the introduction is usually very short, and the literature review focuses very briefly on the state of knowledge and use only a few key references. The main literature review is deferred until the discussion. On the other hand, in the social and behavioral science, the introduction can include quite a substantial literature review. This should not be a simple summary, but should be a critical appraisal, so that the research aim arises from an understanding of the deficiencies in the literature. The research question. The research question is the most important sentence you will write because it directly determines the relevance of your study. It is a plain language statement of a question that a research will answer. When you are reading a research paper, locate the research question, which is almost always in the last paragraph of the introduction. And this will tell you how relevant is this research or this paper to you. All research questions has the term aim or goal. So, what is an aim and what is an objective? An aim or a goal is the outcome you intended to achieve. And objectives are the tasks that will have to be completed in order to achieve the aim. And note that the aims are always clear but general. Let's go through some examples of research questions. I took these questions more or less randomly from PubMed library. Take a few seconds to read this research question. In this example, the author are interested in seeing if simplifying the questionnaires will maintain data quality while making questionnaires easier to fill in. But they will have to decide what kind of questionnaires they are going to study and what kind of participants. Their research will produce an answer to the research question, but not the answer. Here is another example. You can take a few seconds to read it. Again, as we said, aims are general. Here, the authors are going to have to define insomnia and then measure it, either via questionnaire, interview, or medical notes. And also define the socio-demographic factors similarly. They will end up reporting the associations between insomnia and socio-demographic factors as they define and measure them in the sample that they survey. Each study will translate the aim into specific objectives in terms of methods used to gather and analyze the data. These objectives will be laid out in the methods section. Some common mistakes that you should avoid. One is stating what everyone knows, saying like, stroke is the leading cause of female mortality worldwide, 14% of all death. This sentence doesn't set the scene for the research. It merely repeats something that the readers will already know. Another common mistake is putting in facts you haven't checked. Like, for example, saying, cervical cancer is the leading cause of female mortality worldwide. There are a few errors as deadly as putting an incorrect statement in your research paper. It strongly suggests that you, A, either don't know what you are talking about, and B, are not methodical enough to make sure that your work is accurate. Now we'll go into the methods. The function of the methods section is to translate the research question into a study methodology by specifying who the research will study, how it will define and measure the variables of interest, and how it will analyze the data. In other words, it sets objectives for the study. But, and this is a crucial point here, the methodology can only be judged as good or bad by referring it back to the study aim. So, it is important to make sure that your aim and methodology align together. The methodology should take each element of the aim and define it in terms of data collection and analysis activity. The participants. Defining the study population is a key decision that determines the quality and relevance of the study. The study must focus on a relevant population and must draw a representative sample. You should provide eligibility criteria that defined who was eligible to take part in the study and should state any exclusion criteria. You should then describe how the participants were identified and sampled. If the participants are being chosen on the basis of symptoms or disorder, then the criteria being used to define it need to be identified very clearly. The researcher or the research will have to collect the data. The methods used to collect the data are often described as measures. And once again, different methods will produce different results. In the insomnia example I have given earlier, there is a major difference between people who report that they have suffered from insomnia in the past month and those who report that on 3 or more nights in the previous week, they have been awake for 2 or more hours between going to bed and getting up the next day. The first measure allows the people to decide what insomnia is. Fair enough, but it makes it difficult to interrupt the result. The second method, requiring 3 or more nights with 2 or more hours of wakefulness, will produce different results, but these results should be more comparable between different populations. The measures used must be valid, meaning that there are evidence that they really measure what they are supposed to measure, and reliable, meaning that they should measure it with little errors. Generally speaking, researchers will select a measure. Researchers will select a measurement instrument that is already tested and found to perform adequately in different populations that they intended to study. Actually, researchers favor measurement instruments that are already tried and tested because this allows them to compare their findings with the previous findings in the literatures. Now we are going to have a 10 minutes praying break, and we will continue later. So we'll resume our presentation at 6:40.
Thank you, Dr. Manal, for this amazing presentation. Now we will go for praying break. We will come back after 10 minutes to proceed with this amazing presentation. Thank you all for your attending and see you after break.